Here is a thing. This was originally going to be a video about the Surge, but then I had a thought. 1 and 2 have similar mechanics, but the Surge 2 is generally more polished, and while they take place in the same world, it isn't necessary to play and understand the story of the original in order to delve into the sequel. So I started recording the Surge 2, made about as close an approximation to my face as one can get with this character creator, and then it crashed about 3 hours in. Game? It crashed.
Excuse me?
So this is the Ascent. Top-down twin-stick shooter with relatively light RPG elements set in the cyberpunk world of Velez. It was developed by the Swedish game dev studio Neon Giant and published by the London-based Curve Games. Now, Curve is relatively prolific when it comes to publishing indie games. For the King, Just Die Already, Human Fall Flat, Manual Samuel, Neon Giant isn't the same. In fact, NG only has one title listed on Steam and you're looking at it right now. You might think that this then would be an impressive first outing, but you'd only be half right. Yes, this is Neon Giant's first game, but it isn't the first game for those who worked on it. It was founded by industry veterans. You can even see some of these founders working on the game in real time. Take the most immediately accessible example, co-founder Tor Frick. He's got a YouTube channel, hence the whole immediately accessible thing, where you can actually see these designs spawn into existence in real time. But you don't need them to know his skill set. The guy's worked as an art director for New Order, Old Blood, plus did some work on Far Cry 3, Bulletstorm, and Gears of War 3. The same could be really said about the remaining founders as well, Arcade Berg, Jonathan Heckley, Eric Glarson. God, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Still, it remains Neon Giant's first game, technically, if nothing else. Begs the question, is the Ascent worth it? I want to say this now because I think it'd be a major disservice if I don't. I might have some problems with this game, which you'll definitely hear more about the closer we get to the end, but one thing this game nails absolutely perfectly that I simply can't fault it in any way for is the presentation itself. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Ascent looks fucking fantastic, genuinely. The game knows that too. It opens with an on-screen exposition dump all while showcasing its stellar visuals. I just wish it would hide the cursor during cutscenes. Right off the bat is this relatively simple character creator. There actually aren't too many options, as denoted by the fact that for once this character creation process only cost me 3 minutes of my life as opposed to the standard hour. A bit disappointing for one reason more than any other, this game features different sentient alien species all across its game world, but you can only be human. I wish it were different. My imp mentions why I just finished riding this elevator down. There's a problem in the deep stink which Stack Boss Poon has taken personal offense to. Not that I can blame him. So as actual gameplay mechanics go, you can dodge and shoot, but you can also crouch and raise your gun to shoulder height, which allows for the occasional headshot and firing from behind cover. This vertical element is an interesting addition, occasionally forcing the player to take into account things like enemy height and whether or not there's an incline to consider. You'd think that since there's a skill and attribute system tied to leveling up in this game, your guns and weapons might scale with that. Well, with every level you can put 3 skill points individually into any of 8 different skills. They aren't your usual RPG skills, they come in the form of tactical sense, critical hit rate, weapon handling, aiming, balance, evasion, vital signs, and body battery. None of them outright affect your weapon damage, at least not so far as I can tell. Sure, having a faster reload speed means you're firing more often, but that basic damage number is still the same, and that stat doesn't affect how fast those rounds are actually fired. However, they do also fit into 4 separate attributes: cybernetics, motorics, biometrics, and frame. Similarly, not your usual attributes. You can't shove your skill points directly into the attributes themselves, but allocating them into a skill increases its corresponding attribute. You might be wondering then how you increase basic damage for your guns if they're largely unaffected by your skills. Upgrades. Of course, the way you increase the damage of potentially other stats of your weapons and gears by upgrading them with the various components you come across, which has a limit in a few important ways. First, only weapons can be upgraded in this way. Second, they can only be upgraded up to Mark 10 in your first initial playthrough. New Game Plus changes that, but that's still about 12-ish hours away. Third, these upgrades, as previously mentioned, require components of various ranks. You can find components sometimes in the game world, you also find them as drops from bounties. One glaring problem with the whole bounty thing though, they're randomly generated. There isn't even a bounty board, so you need to hope to naturally come across them as you play the game. A guaranteed drop, technically, but it comes from a random enemy that by definition has a chance to show up. I don't like this. These aren't fancy swords with magical properties that require specific materials from likewise magical enemies in order to elicit stronger effects from the blade. These are manufactured guns in a corporation-led cyberpunk world where money rules over all. I'm not saying that these components should be cheap, but I am saying that it doesn't really make sense that these components, which are by definition meant to be a part of the gun or weapon you want to upgrade, can't be bought anywhere at all. Clothes, guns, grenades, turrets, miniature robots, all that, perfectly fine to purchase. There are street corner shops where you can actively, physically change your body. But you can only get components when they're just lying around or because Two-Toes Johnny happened to have one hiding in his socks the day you took his life. I'm aware that this is definitely a game balance thing, especially since superior components are the only finite components in the game. That is, they're the only components with a truly limited number available in a single playthrough, but that doesn't mean I'm happy about it. Past leveling up and the upgrading spiel, you also upgrade your cyber deck by finding its upgrades across the arcology. Cyber deck usage isn't as in-depth as something like Shadowrun or Starcrawlers, it's just pressing a button and getting an effect based on whatever's interacted with, or whatever happens to be around. But I'm pretty sure it's illegal to have a cyberpunk game without a netrunner of some kind, so it's better than nothing at all. There's also a keybind to show where you should go directly in the game world, because the map is, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say over-detailed sometimes, which is unlike the mini-map on the HUD, which is not as much. I'm wishing that I'd used this feature in hindsight. I mean, yeah, the Deep Stink tier map is actually pretty crisp and clean, but once you're out and in the actual world, as opposed to these smaller closed-off areas, you'll be relying more on the mission marker. And that thing had a tendency to take me through enemy territory, which, while par for the course that I might have to shoot some guys in this world where practically everyone is strapped, it occasionally led me directly into the line of fire of enemies a bit too tough to deal with when I found them. Any enemy that has a skull on their health bar is not one you want to deal with yet. The mission marker doesn't care about that distinction though. If it's the quickest available route to your destination, good luck. We got some little shits to fight off here in the Deep Stink. The game calls them ferals. Might be wondering why it is that I feel the need to point out their existence, especially considering this game's relatively varied enemy pool, and why it is that I am also bringing up that the only threat they really present comes in the form of their numbers, but this is what we in the business call foreshadowing. Fixing up the SI is pretty simple too, leading up to Papa Feral in the Augmented Ability tutorial. Augments are abilities that do things. You can have 2 equipped at a time, they cost some energy, have a cooldown, and scale with your skills. How much they scale, what they scale with, and what actually is scaled is dependent on the augment itself, but more is, of course, always more. And plus, super punching these little shits is always fun. We've just nabbed a shockwave grenade as well, a tactical bit of equipment. It also scales off skills, but it doesn't have a cooldown. No, they need to be charged up for use, and you can charge them through damaging enemies or various pickups found in the game. The shockwave grenade goes boom and can be detonated early if one so chooses, but unlike the destination overlay, tacticals will see more use as the game goes on, which is good since the Deep Stink is having some problems. In fact, it's more than just the Deep Stink. We need to talk to Poon to really figure out what's going on, but that requires getting out first. I also just noticed as I'm reviewing the footage to plan this review, I think some of these cutscenes, I'm beginning to think they're just camera switching and panning in specific game world locales in real time. Welcome to the Warrens, a specific tier within the arcology. It's full of people with guns, only some of which want you dead. Before talking to Poon, it might be good to check out the news, just in case Poon conveniently forgets to clue us in on anything important. I'm not saying that I don't believe he'll tell us everything, I'm just saying you don't need me to tell you that he won't.
This is the feed with your very own Grateful Abbott. The Ascent Group went into immediate default after the corporate AI filed for bankruptcy 1 subcycle ago. All attempts to contact the corporate board has failed, and we've yet to receive an official statement. The Ascent Group Arcology on Veles has shut down, with some claiming it's gone into default mode. If this is true, without AG security, corporate grab teams will already be moving in. All the luck to them. As I always say, one being's ill fortune is another's opportunity. Stay tuned.
To all havers in Cluster 13, this is Poon. As you've probably noticed, our dear arcology just defaulted. I don't give a feral's ass about the whys and wherefores. Business will go on as usual. That means no panic, no whining, and certainly no slacking off. Business as usual. Understood? Poon out.
Basically comes down to the arcology and the Ascent group itself is now free game for any other corporation with the funds and manpower to grab it. Literally, corporate grab teams aren't known for hiding in cubicles, after all. We find Poon sitting in the Serenity Plus because he wouldn't be a very good stack boss if he were a boots-on-the-ground kind of guy, at the tail end of a conversation with the leader of the Ascenders, a woman whose name I've just realized as I'm writing this I don't actually remember. It's Celine, apparently. We are the Ascent group. I bet they dance every morning because their corporate overlords demand it and they love it. Poon lets us know why he wanted to talk. Turns out our penchant for murder makes us a pretty viable candidate to act as armed security for a meeting between the various bosses of the arcology. One potential threat brought up is a gang called the Turbo Vipers, which is a name. They've already got a protection racket going on and they're bound to mess up the meat for potential money and infamy. And so off we go to the grinder in the hopes of cutting off the snake's head beforehand. It's rather decorated upon arrival, and I earned my first death in the game for not letting the Turbo Vipers know ahead of time I'd be late to their invite-only party I wasn't invited to. This little animation on the "You Died" death screen, I do kinda like it. After the cavalcade of simple death screens that just so happened to crop up after the Dark Souls series came out, I don't know, this is just nice. Small gripe with that, there's a flash of the game reloading me to a previous spot before it fully decides that I should no longer be on the death screen, and stranger even than that, the HUD appears between the flash and the actual return to the game. I don't know why it happens. This is also the first time I noticed something that'll be a problem later. Enemies have leashes. You can only pull them so far from their designated safety square, after which they'll walk back home and annoyingly heal. The healing is enough that they'll even out-heal any damage you do while they walk back. It isn't too much of a problem right now, but it will be later on. The meeting afterwards is unsurprisingly interrupted, though they're too heavily armed to be Vipers if Poon's comments later are believable, and the gunfight is itself interrupted by an abrupt cutscene. 50% of the time, a cutscene showcasing a new enemy or a boss just has to happen in the middle of a gunfight, which is annoying. The Hammer Twins don't care, but they're not much of a cause for concern either, so shoot them till they're dead. So the attack at the meeting was a distraction to kidnap some folks, oopsie-daisy, but that's fine. Poon's got a plan. What that plan is, we don't know, so we should probably see about that.
I didn't think I'd be showering in urine ever again after you fixed the WMD, but it seems the golden showers won't dry up anytime soon. The kidnappers didn't just grab any random haver when they came reading. Instead, they managed to kidnap almost every key alpha and beta level indent in the cluster. The very people we need to keep this place running. With CorpSec disintegrating, I currently have zero access to the security systems. So I don't have a fucking clue where our havers are, who took them, or why.
If someone wanted to cripple our cluster, they couldn't have done a better job.
I need you to get these people back. Not for their sake, but for ours. We're gonna need help infiltrating the security systems, and I might have a lead for you. There's a quiche. Yeah, I know. But he's a mean icecracker, a real net sage. I've employed his services once before. Unfortunately, it didn't end well, and I might have screwed him over. A bit. Needless to say, he's not accepting my pings, so it's gonna have to be face-to-face, and I'm done leaving the office.
I've learned that he set up shop in Black Lake Towers, where they had the flood. That's what I have. Cost me a good sum. What more do you want to know? What don't you already...
Right, so we're talking to a net sage and potentially dealing with a syndicate called Onyx Void to discover the whereabouts of the kidnapped havers, all of which are either alpha or beta level, which means that Cluster 13 is a sitting duck without them. The weird thing is that we have a dialogue choice specifically to ask about Onyx Void, but Poon didn't bring them up at all, at least not by name, but he talks as if he did and our encounters with them will be inevitable. I mean, they will be, but still. And since I'm bringing up dialogue choices, you don't really make any choice in this game. No real ones anyway, nothing that directly changes the way the story goes. Dialogue options are effectively limited to detail clarification, like what an alpha level indent is, or in this case, what Onyx Void is. A few side missions later, one of which required me to grab feral balls from the Deep Stink, and we're exploring Black Lake Towers. Didn't need to bother heading to the Deep Stink for those feral balls, since it turns out Black Lake is full of the little guys, so I'm very glad I backtracked for that. The only other interesting thing in Black Lake right now is their contact.
Not now. I've almost cracked the distributed cognition. Whoa! Where did you come from? No, wait, who the hell are you?
So the Ascent's voice acting is pretty 50-50 across the board. The main cast is voice acting that even at its worst is still good. Side missions and the like are fairly less so. But this guy is probably the highlight, and it bugs me. I feel like I recognize his voice from somewhere, like some distant memory from years ago, but I just can't place the damn thing, and it bugs me. Forget-Me-Not grants some security access, which in turn means we can talk to Onyx Void. I mean, not literally, just a single guy to talk to. It's not like we're just shouting at a conglomerate of hive-mind aliens. While we're here, should probably grab some new toys and upgrade the toys I already have. Taxi tutorial, bounty, piercing punch, camera pan for a stellar view, Onyx Void, standoff on a tower. No, wait. Go back one. So the Onyx Void ringleader here, big armored dude with a hammer called 438 Hung, which is a much better name than Turbo Vipers, mentions that he'll hand over the details on our habbers provided we do something for him first. There's an Onyx Void agent in danger of spilling info Hung would rather not have spilled. He wants us to take out the Rosian who captured him, as well as him, since he's spoiled goods, I guess. Doesn't even last a minute, including the showy cutscene beforehand, but like, look at this.
You can't have him! Just business!
Hung lets us know that some other big corporation has the indents in need of rescuing, the Malhorst Gelb Corporation. Like I mentioned before, corporation takeovers around here are much more physical than you might initially expect. The reason he knows this is because previously MG Corp employed them for protection, the terms of which they are apparently in breach of. Not really clear why, but an advantage is an advantage. The path to the Cosmodrome introduces a slight annoyance. The camera likes to pan around sometimes when you're in certain areas to showcase the environment because presentation is king. But there isn't actually too much that you can do to control the camera directly outside of something like photo mode or aiming high. This would be fine most of the time, except it isn't all the time. Sometimes it does this when you're in a firefight. Like here, it's only mildly annoying, but it is still annoying. But don't worry, there are worse spots later. One mid-combat cutscene spawned later and we've arrived at the ship containing our lost cargo, which Noghead gives us a hand with.
Oops. Looks like I overdid it a bit. That fuel type is pretty volatile. Anyway, the ship is stranded. Enjoy.
Also a suit here we've got to nab to figure out some of the finer details as to what MG Corp is planning, but the priority is the kidnapped indents. If I'm working, so must they. By the way, this is your spoiler warning. This is where you get off the ride, and here is where you get back on. Good? Good. The kidnapped are no longer kidnapped, and we've kidnapped someone ourselves. He talked, which wasn't surprising, letting slip that 5 indents are still missing. Poon doesn't say if the suit mentioned why they were kidnapped, but with bigger fish to fry, I suppose that mystery can wait. The AGI is still quiet, but we found ourselves a rare opportunity. If we can siphon some energy from their reactor, we can repurpose it for ourselves towards, I don't know, protection against any CGTs that head our way. No grab teams means no corporations to be privy to. We'd have control over our own indent contracts, and once those run out, freedom. Although this is some cyberpunk dystopian bullshit, so I don't know how long that'd last. The Tokamak, fancy fusion reactor, can be found in the Deep Stink, so we head that way after making sure these bros really put in some work for their gains. It's as full of ferals as ever, probably still mad about the balls I stole. There's also some bots blocking the way too. None of them really compare to the big boy when all is said and done. The Mega Arachnoid is one of those cutscene introduced enemies that doesn't interrupt combat. It shits out eggs that can block bullets, spawns kamikaze spiderlings from itself and the aforementioned eggs, has a flamethrower for a mouth, and is pretty good at tanking hits. Aim high, arm yourself with preferably energy gear, stick to range since the flamethrower has a slightly longer reach than you'd think. Actually remember that you have a cyber deck on you and see what happens when you use them on the eggs, though you can't evade or attack for a time when you do so remember that part too. Beating it nets a cool augment that spawns explosive spiders of your own found in a chest outside the room. But first is an introduction to someone new.
That was refreshing. You should stand down, Indent. We don't want to disintegrate you just yet. Were you trying to create a supernova just now? Because that's what your uninformed meddling with the Taurus containment field would have led to. That your stack boss asked you to do this only confirms his incompetence. Luckily, we are in control now. This tokamak is now the property of Y-Corp. So is your stack cluster, and so is every indent registered there, including yourself. Your indentured contracts have been transferred and renewed in accordance with existing agreements and standard protocol, etc., etc. In short, you belong to us for what remains of your pitiful life expectancy. However, while you have demonstrated an alarming lack of cognitive skills, you have also shown an aptitude for applying lethal solutions to conflicted situations. This might be of some use to Y-Corp. So, we wish to test your abilities by giving you a special assignment. A trial of sorts. Success will raise you above the filthy mass of regular indents and provide you with certain perks. And you'll be given a chance at earning your freedom. We will set up an operations center in Cluster 13. Come find us there.
A chance for independence is always a lucrative offer, and I'm absolutely certain that there's no legal loophole or otherwise nefarious intent that'll stop us from achieving that lofty goal, so really there's no reason not to join Y-Corp. Plus, we don't really have much of a choice here. They have our contract. Corporate grab teams, what did I tell you? Joining their CGTs requires completing a test first. In our case, it's collecting data, which is simply done. So simply done, in fact, that I've only got 2 notes from it. My imp might have a thing for murder, and also Noghead. Ooh. Noghead doesn't know who or what Y-Corp is, but notes they have an AGI which takes serious funds. The mission ends with a protect this point combat encounter, after which we are now officially counted among the Y-Corp CGTs. Though Noghead's got some input to give us.
Incoming SSM request from Noghead.
Good. I set up this channel to bypass the SAGI bonds, so that snotty a foreign can't listen in. See, I had a pilfering algorithm piggybacking on the transfer so that I could clone the data. Just a little something I've been working on for a while now. Thing is, she ain't telling you half of it. There's clues in there as to why the Ascent Group went under. Looks like they were pouring Ucreds into some secret mega project enough to buy a fucking planet. A lot of key personnel were being reassigned to that same project, and they also paid Onyx Void plenty of Ucreds for who knows what. Why the hell would Ascent Group do that? What were they working on, and why is Y-Corp so interested? AG, we're also planning a hostile takeover of Malor's Gel, but something went seriously wrong somewhere, and the Ascent Group AGI shut down. The whole corp went belly up, and here we are. Figured you should know, seeing as it's your ass on the line. Talk soon!
The info we grabbed from the vault suggests there was some agreement between Onyx Void and the Ascent Group, the exact details of which will require some more data gathering, which itself requires a bit of a destructive distraction. Looks like the Ascenders want the details for these isotopes as well, because anyone who we don't directly talk to via our imp is an enemy of some kind at some point. The desync itself is found either on or in a guy who naturally, quote, runs away, unquote. Seriously, the guy's riding around on a mega arachnoid like he's a moving lazy boy. Every able-bodied patron of Dreamworld hoping to leave my bubble-blowing baby ass beaten senseless do almost get their wish, but not quite. They should have learned how to shoot downstairs. Now we're stuck in a chase, confused by the choice of security for the sauna, men with pipes for some reason, and experience a minor visual glitch as the Spider-Man flies away. Still on the chase though. And then comes this bridge. A shifting camera angle based on where I happen to be, multiple big boys with chain guns, guys with an augment that actively negates damage they would otherwise receive, the solution for which is firing at and destroying a specific target in a twin-stick shooter that generally doesn't allow as precise aiming by its very nature, leashes that end up activating since the aforementioned chain gunners push me back enough to warrant them following me, and allowing anyone I shot to heal up from the firefight and doubly outheal any damage I deal while they do so, and more enemies that spawn in behind me to negate what little cover I could have. That chain gunner that spawned behind me has its leash at the middle of the bridge too. It's moments like this that make me think the game isn't as well scaled for solo play as it is for multiplayer, since having this annoyingly combined set of enemies is better handled when there's more than one target for your enemies and more than one gun on your side shooting back. But it isn't what hammered in the nail on that particular coffin. Yes, you heard me right. That's not the worst of it.
B-94 located. Destination set. Will we also travel to the stars one day?
Sorry, girl. Not today. Once we finally reach the bays and close in specifically on Bay 94, in comes the camera problem again. I know this game is pretty. I've been looking at it for hours now. Please let me look at the pretty enemies so I can dodge their pretty bullets in an effort to not die in a pretty animation with a pretty death screen. Whatever. New boss, flying mech thing officially called the X-28 Havoc. Here's how that goes. Our target informant is unfortunately caught in the rubble that we caused, and with all that fire, I can't imagine that the remains of the ship will last too long either. Modern problems require modern solutions. After all that, the talking head clues us in on some neat little details. Apparently, the deal between Onyx Void and the Ascent Group centered around the transportation of specific key scientists and various materials, all of which tied to some kind of secret project that the Ascent Group was running. The apparent linchpin of this is a Class 3 HR manager named Laura Lanier. This, of course, requires even more information gathering. Problem is that the trail for this information begins in Stimtown, a place we can't reach right now. Poon offers a solution, claims that we'll owe him even though we're already doing something for him in this transaction, and bam! We're in. Stimtown itself is a bit of a goose chase, penultimately culminating in the mission marker leading me into tougher enemies than I would like. Got some cool dialogue with my imp's obvious love for murder when we find Laura though, so I guess I can forgive it this time. Oh, did I say find Laura? I meant find Laura's body. Yeah, she's dead. Killed in her apartment in Blossom Hills. The Ascenders might have something to do with that if the security cam footage is to be believed. I should have known we'd be dealing with them sooner rather than later. Next stop is the XMAT lab. Two things to note here. First, a pistol called the Minor Note. I do not like it. Second is another Protect the Point style section, this time against the Ascenders, accompanied by a middle of a firefight cutscene introduced enemy, Celine. So it's at this time where I went back to the beginning of this review and wrote down that that's what her name was. I only realized that they were the same person and that was her name long afterwards. As annoying as the interrupting cutscene always is, I also find it weird that the checkpoint respawns you outside the building when you die, but when you enter the building again, you wind up just back in that same room specifically. Why not just have the checkpoint be right outside the room, or here where it teleports you anyway? Celine, though, is actually not too difficult to deal with. It's the addition of her Ascender friends that causes problems, but not enough to make me annoyed this time. Right, to the pinnacle tier we go. That's where the Ascent Group board and AGI are located, so that's the next stop. Need to find the Grateful Abbot's key fob so he can get us up there in exchange for finding it. I don't know why we can't just get clearance via Noghead's meddling the same way we did earlier, but whatever. Anything to pad runtime, I guess, since there isn't much going on in the Pinnacle, at least relating to the main story. This is the lead up to the boardroom. Called the Grand Alley, you have combat against mechs and turrets, automated defenses of one kind or another, and that's it. The enemies are level 21, one above the mission recommended level of 20. Ah, wait, did I say 21? I meant 19. Let's scratch that, 22. This game is semi-open world, so you're mostly free to explore everything except for some locations that are gated off due to normally story progression. This here is one such place. You cannot access this place until you reach this point in the story. Why is there this discrepancy between the actual enemy level and the mission's recommended level when the story is what determines when you get here? Why aren't these enemies that can only be found after reaching this point in the story matching the recommended level of this point in the story? Whatever, at this point I'm getting annoyed at some of the game's quirks and find myself slowly caring less for the story beats themselves. Easy example, the AGI needs to be rebooted to access the locked boardroom because protocol demands it. Noghead claims to have the solution, so we head over to Black Lake only to find an ambush waiting for us. Turns out, Onyx Void twisted Noghead's arm to get this ambush to work. It of course did not. I honestly forgot entirely about the story reason that this all happened, but I remember the fight specifically because I wasn't the one who brought the turrets online. That was Noghead. Another protect the points, another codex entry I will neglect to read. Back to Pinnacle. Let's find out why this whole thing started.
Downloading relevant telemetry data. Playback beginning.
And we have offered Malhor's Gelb quite favorable terms. Next, we must discuss the Habnet Tech acquisition. What's the meaning of this? Decane? What are you doing in here? Security? AGI?
Security is gone. The AGI will soon answer to new masters.
The AGI will what? What have you done?
I've struck a decisive blow against your insidious plans for a foreign domination in this galaxy. The Ascent Group will fall.
I see the AGI has shut itself down and activated 61A. Did you try to re-imprint it? You know better than to...
Shut down? No. The Ascent Group and Project Menshen will belong to the Malhurst Gelb Corporation under my leadership and direction.
You sold us out to Malhorst Gelb? Traitorous scum!
I dedicated my life to the Ascent Group. Decades of unswerving loyalty.
Ah, so this is not about some far-fetched conspiracy theory of a foreign domination. It's about you being passed over for promotion. Like all sapiens, you are a slave under your capricious emotions, Decane. The mentioned portal technology will transform the galaxy. But to think that we would give that kind of responsibility to you is as arrogant as it is stupid. This is exactly why we wouldn't promote you.
And yet here we are, with me about to take control of the entire Ascent Group instead.
Under Malhorst Gelb, the Ascenders will never accept that. There'll be indent revolts on all tiers.
I control the Ascenders now. They will do what I tell them.
Decane, it's not too late. The AGI is in shutdown and can be restored. We can offer you a very generous severance package and...
No, it is you who will be severed. I hereby vote to relieve the entire Ascent Group board of its duties, effective immediately.
This is utter nonsense. Decane.
All in favor?
Aye. Wait! Don't...
The eyes have it.
Warning. Incoming.
You've aggregated quite a debt with us, Indent. I have come to collect.
Ah, right. Hung wants our hide. He's also got some boys to help him, his left hand and right hand. Obvious plans to take out his ads first, allowing the breathing room needed to deal with the big man himself. He doesn't have the gat he had during that telemetry showing a second ago, just a big hammer. Important to note are the occasional homing rocket and the fact his shockwave hammer slam thing, it's got 3 prongs instead of a single line. Nothing else especially important to note, shoot until dead.
Do you even know who your real employer is?
You know he says that line like it's some kind of setup for a huge earth-shattering reveal later? It's really not. Final boss of the base game, by the way. Alright, last leg of the journey, and my final complaints. down into the deep stink one last time. Oh, and if you're curious about Y Corp, have Noghead explain it to you and pay no mind to the subtitles in the corner, they're not important.
Noghead here, secure channel Kira can hear. See, I figured it out. I know how Kira can access the Ascent Group AGI that easy. Remember Protocol 61A? That was an Ascent Group backup plan, a last resort. It created Y Corp with everything in place, including a fledgling AGI. It's like the Ascent Group spawned a kid just before it was damaged beyond repair, one who would take over everything, including Mention. But the kid is like a bawling newborn. It doesn't know shit from Genola. That's why they had to do securing the data and such first. Can you imagine the amount of resources they must have had to just have a spare AGI lying around, waiting to be activated? Mind-bending! What we're doing here is helping Ascent Group save itself. Also, some foreign owners somewhere could keep lining their pockets, and you and me? So Y Corp was born. Your imp's getting cocky. Now let's do this. I ran it on sub-level grids, and it found some very interesting anomalies around a spot near Waste Management Disposal Plant 21G. Should be right below your old haunts. The blueprints don't showcase any obvious access points to that area, but it looks like it can be reached via a maintenance tunnel near the WMD plant itself. I sent the coordinates to your imp.
Welcome, dear audience, to Silo 86. It has everything you could ever need or want in the lead-up to the final fight. Right on the platform at the bottom of the elevator are the scattered bodies of ferals, warning me of what's to come. At first, there's only a few, ranging in levels from slightly below to slightly above the mission recommended level of 23. But as I go on, the numbers get larger, the waves stronger. As I get pushed back in an effort to avoid their melee tendencies, I also discover more ferals spawning from areas I thought I already cleared, adding to this murderous mass. The explosive barrels clear out a sizable chunk, but unlike the enemies, the barrels themselves don't respawn alongside me if I die. They are a resource I cannot get back. The ferals bunch up in their efforts to overwhelm, but there's no stopping to use an augment or a tactic to lessen the flow. The animations, they take time, enough time to wind up dead if I'm not careful. It's better to consistently move out of reach just enough that the amount of damage received is as low as it can be. The numbers aren't small, but they aren't large enough to be detrimental or push me back enough to activate their leash. This is manageable. More forward, more ferals too, but that's no surprise. Papa ferals add to their mass, more danger, more threat. They sport a rocket barrage, zoning me while I run. Of course their artillery can't harm their children. Only me. Pushed back again. The little ones form a misshapen conga line to get to me, but run away. The leash. They run. They heal, and I need to go forward again. More barrels lost, but some ferals are taken with them. Every little bit counts when the foes can heal if they run far enough away. The ferals spawning once more from cleared areas don't help at all. The conga line returns, the push forward returns, the spawn returns. This specific encounter ends in a fight against a level 25 and a level 24 Papa Feral, one of which is a bounty that is not a worthwhile reward for the endeavor. All I truly have to show for this feud is the need to push forward again. There are more ferals waiting for me, another conga line to lead. I no longer see them as individual enemies, I instead find myself blindly firing into the singular mass in the hopes that some scales fall off this wretched snake. It's a constant song and dance. Forward, feral, back. Forward, feral, back. Forward. Wait. The song is interrupted. Automatic defenses that offer me, unfortunately, no aid. Sniper turrets that try to home in on me, mortars cancel potential escape routes, auto turrets fire at me from multiple angles. The ferals don't care. The turrets don't answer to me, so they're not firing at them. This is a war of attrition, one which I'm certain I cannot win. My evades will fail me, the ferals will block me in, the turrets outrange me from off of the screen. This is a corridor of death, and only too late can I realize that. Back, the ferals still chase. From above, the mortars condemn any cover I can have from the snipers, and the snipers force a constant use of evade. Far enough away and no turrets can reach me, but now that they've spotted me once, any future attempt to reach them is much more potentially lethal. I blindly fire in the direction I know the turrets to be in, hoping somehow that my energy rounds can hit them. Escaping into a side passage only shows a blocked corridor, and going to the right only serves me my death. So I find myself back again. The platform at the bottom of the elevator. The scattered bodies of ferals warning me of what's to come. I slip into a side passage, unlocking a shortcut I hadn't noticed before, and the ferals chase me. The pattern breaks. New foes, bots, level 26, 27, 29. Explosive spider, another turret, but this time only the one, guarding another shortcut I've yet to unlock. Returning from whence I came, I notice I'm on the other side of that blocked side passage from before, which unfortunately suggests where I might have to go next. The pattern returns. Forward into the main passageway. Ferals immediately hound me, pushing me back into the room. In their chase, their leash activates. They heal. I go forward. This was a small wave, but another more numerous one spawns after that pop of feral falls. Back. Their leash activates. They heal. I push forward. They push back. Their leash activates. They heal. Forward. Back. Leash. Heal. I need to exit this room to guarantee this stops, so I do. Their numbers have increased so much that there are a few confused about what they should be doing, and instead stand around looking lost. Eventually find a solution to the pattern. Run past everything. If they can't stop coming, then why would I fight? If the game refuses to let up with annoying tactics, then I'll use an annoying tactic of my own. If you want me to engage in your fights, make them fun or interesting, preferably both. Not tedious, not a slog, not this. Most firefights in this game might last a couple of minutes at most. The last boss of the game took a minute and a half. It took me almost a half hour to get past these friggin' seemingly infinitely respawning and regularly healing ferals. And guess what? That isn't even the end of it. Past them is the actual entrance to the Menshen facility, guarded by many enemies above the recommended level for the mission, which is 23, in case you forgot. The very first enemy I shoot is level 27, which is 4 above, and they kill me because one at level 26 literally pulled a nothing personal kid. At least this is the first time I like where the checkpoint is. It's right here. That death only made me superstitious, and the first thing I do is blind fire off screen and earns me a new high score, level 28. Took a bit, but they're dead now. Left me limited in terms of my health pool, but they're dead. Now I just need to not die, because when I respawn, so do they. But they might come in a new arrangement of levels and capabilities. An advanced component and $600. Worth it. Did I say worth it? I meant to say level 28 siege mech named Gundalf. Death means respawning, which means attempt 2. Turns out the leash is the edge of this room. Not a lot of room to maneuver then. Die at the very edge of a barrel explosion, but at least the barrels won't respawn. I won't die that way again. Attempt 3. After dealing with the less dangerous guys, I pull the mech closer to the turrets by the door while throwing my own. A combination of all 4 of us firing plus some spider bots finally brings the fucker down. But we're still not done. I reach level 25, and since this is a new area, this is now a new mission. The recommended level is 25 now. I'm at where the game says that I should be. Can you guess the level of the first guy I come across? If you guessed 28, congratulations, but there's more, because the literal very next guy is level 30. Let's skip this level and resulting damage discrepancy part and get to the next part that annoys me. Protect the point, right? But in previous sections like this, you could freely move around while the countdown was happening. You can't do that here. You have to stay in a specific zone. And you have some cover, but not too much because melee enemies exist, and being at the top of the stairs is always a disadvantage. There's no way to shoot down. You can't shoot anyone at all until they're fairly close to you, since the zone's at the top of the stairs. Not to mention that level issue is still around. We're still not technically done. Not because this next part is especially difficult. If I'm being honest, it's a cakewalk compared to what I just went through. It is, however, incredibly unexpected.
Ascenders, the extraordinary moment we have all been waiting for is at hand. Throughout the history of this galaxy, there have always been times of tremendous change. Different species harness the power of science to reach for the stars, to colonize distant worlds. But though we've come far, one last barrier has always held us back. Travel between worlds has been slow, arduous, and done at immense cost. Now, that will change. With the Menshen portal, we will travel instantly among the stars. With it, we will control the galactic market and restore the Ascent Group to its former glory. Ascenders for the Ascent Group!
Impressive speech. If those deluded idiots only knew they're working for Malhorst Gelb. Ah, the irony.
Team! Passion! Commitment! Open the Menshen Gate!
Now, with that kind of a reveal, you might think the ensuing combat is going to be really interesting. It's not. Hit the button between waves of enemies. Congrats, you beat the game. The Ascent is a twin-stick shooter with RPG elements developed by Neon Giant and published by Curve Games. And I'm sure I'll be dealing with its Cyber Heist DLC at some point. I don't think I'll be doing a review of that, specifically. Ooh, one final thing to note. It apparently features melee combat, but it hasn't even given me the achievement to bring a knife to a gunfight, despite carrying around a bat for about 80% of the game. I have to chalk that up to either a bug or a misleading achievement description. This game is kind of frustrating in terms of potential recommendations. I found myself enjoying it less the more time went on, and even more so once I started actually paying attention to the things that annoyed me, if that makes sense. The game looks, sounds, and generally feels fantastic, and the world itself can have some interesting stories and gameplay. There's a fair amount of gear to use of varying viability relative most often to what you're fighting at any given moment, which lends itself to some cool playstyles. A single button press to sell all duplicates of gear you already own when you're at a shop is just a good quality of life choice that I constantly forgot about. But in terms of actual execution, the game can be very hit or miss. A lot of the story beats, except for one that came almost completely out of left field, I remember more because of the combat encounters involving them than anything else. Running from place to place feels slow, and using evade as the most stopgap of travel skills isn't exactly a solution. You can only have 2 guns at a time, but there's 4 elemental damage types, which can occasionally mean switching them up via the menu mid-combat, since there's no mechanic like hot swapping between loadouts that I could find. Adding this to the occasional lie that is the recommended mission level, and combat can be an occasionally frustrating mess of stopping and starting in an effort to deal as much damage as possible against enemies the game sometimes doesn't properly warn you about. Picking up a new augment is always cool, but you can't try out your new toy immediately as switching an augment on the field drains all of your energy. There's a couple things I'd love to see in the future as well: a shop to buy upgrade materials, and the option to choose your species and character creation, an actual bounty board to make farming bounties a little bit more reliable, if you have friends to potentially play the game with, or if you love aesthetics and presentation over all other aspects of gaming, I recommend it. Some of the scaling issues and various quirks I personally had with the title can be alleviated by having more than one gun firing at a time. Plus, it's fun to drool over how a game looks with other people who can appreciate that kind of thing. If you like solo play and aren't put off by the occasional difficulty spike due to not properly conveyed information, I'd wait for a sale. The Ascent doesn't offer too much that can't be found elsewhere, if we're being honest, but the aforementioned presentation is advantage enough alone that it can edge out over some of those competing games, to the point where I still beat it despite the issues I had. If what you're looking for is an interesting story, I don't recommend it. The world itself is pretty cool, but the storyline doesn't fit that potential. It can also be a bit too predictable at times, barring one specific spot at the end. Every important character has some form of "you'll owe me for this" that only further increases that predictability, like, yeah, of course I'm gonna owe you for this, that's what you're going to say. The status quo only changes in two specific aspects, but the storyline doesn't accommodate for that change in any meaningful way, since those changes are at the literal end of the game, and one of those is just never talked about. Well, let's change up my patterns here a bit. See, normally when I'm done with a video, I'll take about a week or so procrastinating, deciding what game to do next. But not today, not this time. I'm going to tell you what's next, in the potentially vain hope that this public claim will in some way force me to stick to my guns and follow my own lead. The next video is going to be a game a friend of mine recommended I review, over a year ago now. Cult of the Lamb. After that, though, will be a video that isn't a review. It's something tangentially related to video games and gaming as a whole, but not about a video game. After that's your regularly scheduled programming. Shadow of the Erdtree if it's out by then, though if that's a review or a highlight reel of me running through it will be determined if and when it happens. If it is not out by then it'll probably be either X4 or No Man's Sky. Maybe even get back to that one franchise of games that I haven't finished yet, something spacey. For now though, I've gotta fit that Gravity Falls Lammy song somehow into the narrative structure of a video game review based on a game that features anthropomorphized animals occasionally wanting to eat shit. I'll see you later. Story out.